Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wired for Success podcast. My colleague here, Steve Costello, and myself, Patience Modevi, we are talking about codependency and what is really not talked about so much. So, the things you don't really hear about. So, today we're going to talk about a little bit of the controversy, or maybe the things that you know, but you don't want to be said out loud. We're going to say them out loud and speak about that and give you a little bit of maybe a tip or two on what to do in the case, if in case you are experiencing that in your life. So I'm going to leave Steve to start, and then I'll come back later. I'll interject.
Yep,
into-
cool. Thanks, Patience. So I did some thinking about what's not really talked about and came up with a load of headers and then started to put my brain into the headers, like what does this mean and so on and so on. And then my psychology brain took over and I was in danger of delivering a psychology lecture, which is not what we want to do. So as Patience said, we want to touch on these areas, but we want to give some tips as well as to what we can do about it. So let's see if we can do that. So the first thing that came up on my list was about mutual dependency. So this is particularly relevant more so in situations where there's a single parent family. So let's keep it really simple. We've got a mum and a son. This is coming from an example that I saw in action on Sunday, the previous Sunday. So mum seems to be relying on this young person quite a lot for support, for emotional support. And it seemed okay until the son, a little bit later, had a breakdown almost over nothing that really, really mattered. So I wonder if the stress on him was a little bit too much and the mum hadn't seen it. Not from that one example where I saw her leaning on him, but whether it's something that is going on frequently. It's not very long since the mother and father split up. So I wonder if the mother is leaning on the son a little bit too much. And for his stage in development, which is just about adolescence, it's very difficult for him to cope with all of that. Almost like she's using the young guy as a sounding board to check out her emotions. It's okay, we need to do that stuff. We need to be able to use friends, relations, and so on as sounding boards sometimes. But is it right to use adolescents who are at the moment trying to zoom off into their own world of independence? You know, are we pulling them back and slowing them down? So we need to have a good think about that. There are major life stresses. You know, I just mentioned that the two parents split up not very long ago. There's things like that would lead to divorce, illness, a
Yeah.
death in another part of the family. You know, there's all sorts of stuff that goes on. So we need to be very conscious of the kind of dependency we're creating as adults. It's not just the dependency that young people have and need sometimes. So what do you think about that, Patience? Have you got anything to put in?
I think that you can even think about it as often every challenges that we have that comes with grief, for example. And when I say grief, it could be grief of anything. Like what you're talking about now is grief of the relationship, the fact that the dad is gone. It could be grief of somebody who's died. Like in the last episode, when you were mentioning about this dad that was now a single dad because the mom had passed away. So I think what we need to understand in those situations is that everyone is feeling emotional, not just the parent. So when the parent is depending on, for example, the child, when there's this mutual dependency because of something that happened in the family, how do we manage those emotions? How do we make sure that this person is taken care of and this person is taken care of? And maybe here is a little bit of doing a little bit of reflection will be great, you know, and saying, I need this, or I need this, or I feel this way, you know, which we never kind of stop to say. Normally we just go, 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 go.
Yeah, that's this is perhaps a good time. We didn't talk about this before going live today, um, but perhaps it's a good time to talk about react and respond.
Mm.
Quite often, I think if we could do a straw poll of all the people on the planet, many of us are very good at reacting to the things that are going on around us. And we react sometimes a little bit too quickly. Bump, 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 bump. We've reacted, and by the time we've realized we're reacting, somebody else has reacted to what we reacted to, and then we've got this whole big snowball of confusion going on. But if we stop and take a breath and then respond, that gives a very different kind of scenario
Yeah,
building out of it. So let's try and respond to things. So with our team, sometimes we need to respond rather than we need to react.
yeah,
Sometimes we need to teach our teams how to respond rather than react as well. I had an argument with my daughter some months ago that was created because she reacted to something that she thought I said. What I said was kind of in the region of what she thought, but it wasn't the same. And it created chaos. And was also a discussion about her independence. I was trying to support her, but she didn't kind of see it in the right way. Quite interesting. So let's think about this. Let's call the transition of adolescence from being dependent totally on parents. And Patience has got a good example of the hug with her son in a minute. So we've got this dependence and then it kind of moves away from us and becomes independence at some point in the future, which is quite cool. That's the way it's going to go. We can't stop that. So we need to look after it. But what we do need to realize is that this transition from dependence to independence doesn't go in a straight line. Think about your own personal growth as an adult. Personal growth doesn't go in straight lines. It's not nice and neat. It's all over the place. Sometimes it falls to the floor or appears to, and then we've got to climb back up again. Well, it's the same for teams going from dependence to independence, and we need to be aware of that and think about it. It's not something we often think about. Why not? Because we're busy in the moment.
yeah, that's right.
And we forget that this stuff is going on. So let's try and remind ourselves. So Patience, your example, I think, was quite a cool one.
Yeah.
The one about your son. That was a good one.
So what I was talking about was the hugging. So I love to hug everyone in the family. And I've got three boys and my husband, so I'm the only woman. So it's always been something that's been like my thing of hugging everyone. And the hugs were coming. They were coming, they were coming, they were coming until at certain points they started to live to be less. So if we had this intensity of hugging, we went from this to this and this to this. And now it's to a point where I don't get any more voluntary hugs. I have to go and get the hugs. So I'm like, can I get a hug? And most of the time they'll come up with an excuse like, oh, mom, I'm doing this, or I'm busy, or I'm going to be late, you know, and I'm going to go wait. As if to be honest, it's a little bit of it, as if I've got something super important, you know, to tell them. And they wait, and then I go and just hug them. And I feel like this is exactly what we talk about. I was really dependent on these hugs. These hugs was like my comfort blanket, you know. So the blanket being pulled away, I'm not ready to pull it completely away. So I have to find a way, a different strategy to get it so that I can get a little glimpse of it. I know that we're talking about this very lightly, but if you just take that example and they put it on, what is it that you are actually at the moment experiencing in terms of like mutual dependency?
Yeah. And a question that comes up there based on what you've just been talking about is, do we as parents have a fear of becoming obsolete? Obsolete is quite a strong word, but
It is.
do we have that fear? Do we as parents sometimes unconsciously kind of keep our teens dependent upon us or try to keep them dependent upon us because we've got a fear of being left behind somewhere as they run off and do the things that they want to do in their lives? One of my daughters wants to go traveling and will do so probably within the next 12 months. She's kind of working it out. And I've got to be honest and say I'm a bit jealous. I traveled loads when I was younger, and I am a bit jealous. I'd love to be doing that with her as well. It's not going to happen this time around, you know. But that shouldn't mean that I kind of try and keep hold of her and say, oh, don't do this, don't do that, don't go here, don't go there. That's not for me to say. She's got to find out for herself. I've got to be open and allow her to do it, you know. So, but let's go back to this.
And it's the same thing for you as a parent, because for you as well, you might not be able to go traveling right now, but what if that sparks something that you can do for yourself
Yeah,
instead
so,
of the living into these your daughter's, I guess, your daughter's life.
yeah. So this whole thing about becoming obsolete, it's one of those dynamics that I think we don't really acknowledge in any discussions about independence, and we need to do some thinking about it. You know, you might have heard we've talked to patients, and I've talked about the empty nest syndrome thing that probably relates to this idea of becoming obsolete. But it's something to think about. You know, how do you feel about it? And if you can't cope with how you feel about it, that's okay. But don't put it onto your team. Talk to patients all right about it. Leave us a message, leave us a comment, do whatever you've got to do to get in touch, and we will respond because it's something that matters. If you got that feeling, it's important that it's talked about. It shouldn't be ignored.
And I think you have to manage I will say you have to manage your mental health. This is part of managing your mental health so that you understand that it is the norm or it is normal. It's not something that is strange or is being done to you, because the emptiness syndrome can bring feeling of isolation, or I'm not wanted anymore, I'm not needed anymore. You know, there's all these things about me, what's happening to me, but really and truly, even with ourselves, we need to also manage the fact that our own emotions, they vibrate to others' emotion, but we've got to let it go. It's not just me, 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 me.
Yeah. And I think just whilst we're on mental health, I think it's important to note, and there are many, many examples of this, that often, and very quietly so, teens take on a role of an emotional caretaker.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is they're helping parents who may be struggling with things like anxiety or depression, and there are other things. So they become a kind of caretaker who's looking after the parent and their mental health challenges. That's not good for dependence and independence. We need to really do some thinking about that. That's why it's important for parents to be able to say to somebody on the outside, hey, I need to talk to somebody. I need support.
I agree.
I'm feeling a bit frustrated because I know we've got to finish soon, but yet there's so much more to say on this one. So do you want to finish off, Patience?
Yes. Unfortunately, as we said many times already, the subjects that we bring to you are not subject that can be dealt with in a small podcast. We have to support you into building things. So it's like a puzzle and you're building the pieces, you know? So here is just a really small piece of the puzzle. So it's just how we can bring in tools, techniques, strategies that will help you to overcome these things. And this is what we are here for. So if there's anything that you need, even if it could be the silliest thing and you're thinking, oh, this is so silly, it does not matter. Put a comment. If you don't want it to be on a comment, send us a DM, email us, call us, you've got a WhatsApp. Just get in touch because it is really easy to say, oh, I don't have a problem with this, I don't have a problem with that, and yet still being battling with small challenges that actually you could easily overcome if you had the support. Yeah. So we'll be back next week. We'll still be talking about codependency because this subject seems to be one with multiple things. There's one thing also you need to know, like there's so much behind it. So there's the psychology behind it. I guess there's the science, there's even the spiritual sides to it. We can't go into all of these in podcast, but what we can do is prompt for you to open your mind to this and reflect, oh, do I need support in here? Okay, I get it. All right, so we'll see you next week for our next episode of the Wired for Success podcast. Thank you.
Brilliant. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.